It's the Nittany No Huddle podcast, filmed at the Nittany No Huddle studios. I'm your host, Jordo, here with Zach and Coach Devin. Welcome back, Nittany Nation, to the Nittany No Huddle podcast. Today, we're going to be recapping Penn State at Purdue. What a wild game that was. Didn't think we were going to win. We did our, quick recap right after the game, but what a roller coaster. So we're going to dig in a little bit, just go through, our offensive line, running backs, wide receivers, those sort of things. And then compare them to, kind of what we thought going in and what we can definitely improve on going into the Ohio game. So I'm going to start it off. We'll hit it with the offensive line. Overall, offensive line, I think initial reaction, we might have been a little harsh on the offensive line. I really think they did something very well. We do have a position problem at, I believe that's right tackle. Correct me if I'm incorrect there. But I'm drawing a blank on his name right now.
Caden Wallace.
Yeah, Caden Wallace. Sorry. Caden Wallace. He just got exposed a lot during the game. So we saw a lot of those pressures coming from the right side where Clifford was having to step up, those sort of things. So definitely could improve on the right tackle side. But overall, our run blocking didn't look too bad, and our pass blocking didn't look that bad either. I'll turn it over to Zach if you want to start in on the offensive line and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there's good there, and then there's bad to reference what you started with. I think I hate to single people out, but obviously the coaching staff did, based on the fact that Bryce Hefner was in for that last drive and kind of locked things down at the right tackle spot. But there was a number of plays where Wallace in pass protection just got beat, and he got beat quickly. It's one thing if you're getting beat. It's another thing when the defensive end is just going with the speed rush and he's in your quarterback's lap, a second and a half, 2 seconds after the snap of the ball. It just blows up the whole play. And unless you're running some kind of really quick passing route, you can't have that. And so it was very interesting. Franklin, I believe after the game, referenced that the plan was always to get Bryce Hefner in the game. And watching the game back, I didn't note if Hefner had gotten in before that last drive. So I don't know if that's a bit of a coach protecting his player, or if they really like Hefner and that was the plan. But small sample size of that last series. But if you watch that last series on offense, Hefner played really well. It wasn't any major mistakes. And one thing, maybe we can get into at a different point, just in terms of scheme and strategy, I really liked a lot of the things we did in that last drive. So whether Hefner came in and locked things down or whether he, just kind of survived, I'm not sure. Part of it is if you're not, we all can watch quarterbacks play and we can watch receivers and running backs. It's a little more difficult to the layman to sort of analyze offensive line play, other than those obvious instances where you're just getting, physically manhandled. So all things considered, the run game, we covered this, the run game wasn't what we'd like it to be, but I think largely they kept the quarterback upright. So decent start, room for improvement is probably how I would characterize it.
Yeah, and one of those things too, when it comes to that last drive, I've been seeing a lot of chatter about this on, social media, that we should be running that 2-minute offense the whole game. That's not totally feasible. And Purdue was lining up in a more prevent defense during those times. So they were not, rushing and blitzing like they were all game. So that afforded a little bit more time to get rid of the ball as well. So that's what I'll say about that. Devin, you want to take over your thoughts on the offensive line?
Yeah, I kind of agree that I think we may have been a little bit harsh. I still think it all comes down to a scheme thing, and we've talked about this before, even last year on the few podcasts that we did. The whole RPO scheme makes it really hard to block as an offensive lineman. We could have been called for illegal men downfield way more often than we probably will get called for. I don't know why that doesn't get called more. But I agree. I think other than really both ends, I thought kind of struggled at times. I know we already talked about Caden Wallace, but I think the middle seemed pretty secure. Scruggs at center and both guards. I didn't feel like a lot of pressure came through the middle on pass protection. But I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and heading forward, there's at least a lot of hope that we can, maybe our offensive line will be okay. Still, the RPO still is gonna be a challenge for them. But we'll see.
Yeah, I noticed too, when we were lined up under center, our run blocking was significantly improved. And that will transition right into our running backs, which I think that affected a lot of our running backs, especially later in the game. We kind of didn't run under center at all, really, in the second half. Um, Maybe a few times. I think I have it written down somewhere, but um, yeah, we saw a lot of different looks from the first half to the second half, and noticeably our running game went significantly down in the second half. So, Zach, I don't know if you want to talk about that. You can talk about, the running backs, what you saw from them, and what we think going forward.
Yeah. So this is something we covered in the recap, and I think one of the things Devin was all over it right away. Singleton had 9 carries for 30-ish yards in the first half, and I went back and double checked. He had 1 carry in the second half. And one of the things I really liked in the first half, sort of something I liked and didn't like, maybe two sides of the same coin, was we were a little a little obvious with our strategy. We were sort of run, pass every series for the first few series. But I still at least like the fact that they came out and said, we're going to make running ball our priority, and we're going to be committed, and we're going to, even if we're going to be obvious about it, we're going to run the ball. And there was a number of under center plays. I think Singleton's first carry after the Purdue punter had pinned Penn State maybe inside like the 15 or the 10, picked up a 9-yard gain and just, took the handoff and was just up the gut. And it was quick. It was a quick hitter, and you could see the athleticism that he had. And I think we all wanted to see a little bit more of that. Wanted to see perhaps getting Singleton and Allen into space more, because there was a lot more sort of your traditional RPO or your traditional handoffs sort of right up the middle. I think we all want to see those guys in space. Those guys have wheels, athleticism. One of the better plays actually on the last drive, game-winning series, Penn State snuck a halfback sweep into Allen, and I think it was Brenton Strange sealed the end really, really well. Either Scruggs or one of the guards was pulling. This was a play off to the right, and Allen got out in the open, shook a couple guys, picked up 9. So I think going forward, that's got to be part of the, Lee's the guy that you want to run up the gut. We don't want to see Lee trying to bounce things to the outside, but it sure would be nice whether it's designed run plays or whether it's screen passes, tosses, whatever you got to do, you got to get those guys in space and let them use their athleticism.
Yeah, and I'll say with Lee, I noticed a few of his runs in my in-depth notes after I went back and rewatched the game. A lot of his runs, there were open holes. He's just honestly too slow to hit them. And if we had other backs in, I think maybe they can get through some of that. So just an interesting dynamic. We'll see. Personally, I don't have a problem with Lee. I just am not completely sure should be getting a third of our snaps, essentially. And I know you have the snap count up handy, Zach?
I do, yes.
If you want to just run through the running backs real quick and give us a snap count, because I know Singleton was actually on the field a good bit, especially on touchdown leading drives. Actually, I think he was on the field for 3 of them at some point in those drives. So that's kind of a big factor too with the pass block.
Yeah, so you had a pretty even split among the top 3. Allen had 28 snaps, Kevon Lee had 24, Nick Singleton with 23. Devin Ford had 4, none bigger probably than that 4th and 2 naked boot pass out of the backfield to him. And maybe he starts to find that sort of passing down running back position. I don't know. I think one thing I noticed with the running backs is everybody did a solid job picking up pass protection. I know that's one thing, especially with true freshmen, because when you're Katron Allen or Nick Singleton, you're not getting asked to pass block in high school. So I was pretty pleased with what I saw from that. So if you have, maybe it's a good problem to have, is a couple guys that you trust, and then figuring out from there whose role is what and when and how many carries. That's on the staff to figure out. But I think it's a good problem to have a couple guys that can play and that can kind of do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And Devin, you want to talk about your view on the running backs? Hit any points we might have missed?
Yeah, I totally agree there with what you said, Zach. That was what I was going to bring up is both Singleton and Allen, I thought, did a really solid job as true freshmen in their first college game playing against a Big Ten opponent. Both did a solid job doing their job as far as picking up pass blocks, running routes whenever they needed to, doing the little things that sometimes when you're by far the best player on a high school team, you don't always have to do, because you're just that much better than everyone. So I was very pleasantly surprised at both Singleton and Allen. I just don't think Kevon Lee needs that many touches. He looked good at times, honestly. Like Jordan said, I thought he did some good things. I just don't know if he's not an every down back. Not that it looks like we're going to be an every down back team, but could we get those 9 carries split between Singleton and Allen so they're both at 15 instead of 10 and 8? I still don't think 3 running backs rotating 10 carries, 8 carries, 9 carries. It's just not going to be effective. I don't think it come the time of the year where we're playing good teams. Sure, this week against Ohio or whatever, yeah, they each get 15 carries. It's fine. But when we're at Ohio or when we're playing Ohio State, I don't think we can split up 32 carries between 3 guys, or I would like to be closer to 40 carries maybe between 3 guys. So
Yeah, and
but they did okay.
Yeah, I think they did okay. It's just I think the play calling, and maybe this is a scheme issue more. I just want to see Singleton have maybe somebody in front of him, like even put Warren up there, just give him an extra blocker, maybe to give him a chance to evade and get into some space. We saw on his kick returns, and we'll talk about this in the special teams section, but he was averaging like 20 yards a kick return. Like that's pretty good for his first game ever being back there. So I think we have some room for improvement. I think Franklin is trying to feel out the running back room, seeing who's going to be that guy. And I'm hoping Ohio, maybe he just let's stick with one guy for the first quarter or something, just see how he does and kind of let him prove himself, or let each of them prove themselves. Hopefully we're up by enough points that it won't be a factor, but we'll talk about that in the preview.
On that point, if you watch the Franklin post-game press conference, that was something he repeatedly hit on. And he was actually asked, and we'll get to this with the defense in terms of the rotation and how many players are playing and splitting roles and whatnot. And he was specifically asked about that a couple of times. And he made the point, strenuously a couple of times, that his goal right now is building depth. He referenced last year, we didn't have depth and it killed us. When Clifford went down, we were not ready to handle it at Iowa. PJ Mustipher goes down, and we didn't have a defensive tackle that was ready and sort of willing to, step up and be that guy. And that's admirable. And I think building depth is great. And I think you look at Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State, and part of the reason they're so dominant is that somebody gets hurt, they pull a 5-star guy off the bench and he's ready to go. So that's great. But at the same time, there are moments in games where you need to have your best players on the field. And this has been something that he's done in the past as well, is especially defensively playing a lot of guys, and it's great. But in those key moments, you want to have your best players out there. And so we'll talk about that more maybe on the defensive side, but I thought it was very interesting when he was pressed by a couple of reporters that he just kept going back to that. I'm going to build depth here. We're going to build depth. We're going to play players. It's not going to change. So look forward, to the next couple of games. We're going to play guys and figure out who we have and who we don't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for building depth, but maybe let's establish some starters first, like before it's next guy up. That's my takeaway. And he is right though. We did struggle with depth last year, but I don't know if the first road game in conference is where you want to be trying to figure that out. That's all. But that's the schedule we were given. So thanks, Sandy Barber. We'll move on. Let's talk about our wide receiver room. We did have 4 passing touchdowns, receiving touchdowns this week. A lot of good plays and a lot of bad plays from the wide receiver room. So I'll start it out. The drops can't happen. We can't have 6 drops in a game. That's just not going to cut it. We're not going to beat good teams by dropping the ball. And I went back and watched all those drops. Almost all of those were on 3rd down, and they were guaranteed first downs. In space, open, just, going to be a big chunk of yards. So we'll see. Hopefully, our wide receivers, get some more stick 'em this week or something, but we need to see a little bit more out of them. After catch, once they actually caught the ball, we had some great runs out there, and we'll also we can lump the tight ends into the wide receivers as well and talk about them. But our tight ends, I think, played very excellent this week. So Zach, I'll let you take it over. You can go a little bit more in depth, go down to the numbers with them. So
sure. Yeah. I think you're largely right. I don't really have much dispute with what you said there. I think the drops were definitely a problem. I think Lambert Smith had 3 drops, I'm pretty sure, before that really nice touchdown where he just caught a slant bounce.
He had 3 drops in the first.
He had 3 drops early, and it didn't look good, and it kind of looked like eventually it was just starting to kind of get in his head. But I know Parker Washington dropped an easy one. Warren dropped it. Not easy to catch pass, but a pass that Drew Aller had put right on the money in zone coverage.
And real quick with Warren, I went back and watched the tape. He had taken a big shot actually right before that play. So I think he might have still been like recovering a little bit when he got put in that spot. So
that's a tough
defend a drop, but
that's a tough route for a tight end. I mean, more than anything, it's just the ball that Aller threw there was so great that it's just one of those where like you got to catch it, because he put it precisely where it needed to be in between two defenders. So Warren had a good game though, so we won't be too hard on him. And actually, again, same thing. Lambert Smith had some really ugly drops. He had a great individual play. I mean, that touchdown from Clifford to Lambert Smith was pretty much all Lambert Smith. Ran a short route, caught the ball, got smacked, but something emblematic of both defenses on Thursday night was poor tackling, and nobody wrapped him up, and he just stayed on his feet. Very athletic guy, stayed on his feet and took it off right up the middle for a touchdown. But yeah, I think, that there were some moments that were not impressive by the Penn State receivers and tight ends generally. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's a position group you're going to have to worry about too much. I think it was immediate. One thing I wanted to make sure we discussed is Mitchell Tinsley can play at this level. There's sometimes questions about, he put up 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns or whatever it might be at Western Kentucky. How does that translate to the Big Ten? And it doesn't always translate, but I mean, he was wearing number 5, so there was shades of Jahan Dotson out there. And I think probably the one of the unsung plays on the final drive was not just the fact that we ran a nice hitch and he turned it into a nice gain, but that he got like 30 yards after the catch, stiff arming the cornerback and running down the sideline.
And got out of bounds.
Parker Washington's going to be fine. I think he only had 2 catches, maybe like 30 yards or something. Just didn't get a lot of targets, and that might have been a scheme thing from Purdue. I don't know. One thing we talked about in previous weeks was, I think with the receiving core that Penn State has, coupled with the tight ends and a couple guys I think that you can really catch the ball out of the backfield, this might be one of those offenses where one day it's Tinsley and he gets 10, 12 targets. The next day it's Parker Washington. Maybe it's the tight end room that takes advantage. You're going to have a multifaceted passing attack. And I think that makes it better for Clifford, is that there's not one guy that you have to hone in on and that defenses can hone in on. It's just, you have a lot of guys that can beat you. So all in all, I think there was some warts, but I don't think wide receiver and tight end as a group you're going to have to worry too much about.
Yep, Devin, you want to talk about your thoughts on the wide receiving core?
Yeah, I pretty much echo everything that you guys said. Obviously, there was some very concerning drops early, but I thought everyone kind of settled down and played pretty well the rest of the game. I always love to look at targets versus catches, and I also love that now yards after catch is a box score stat, so you don't have to dig around and find it; it's right on the box score, which is awesome because I love yards after catch. And when you look at the ones we have, I mean, Tinsley had 12 targets, like Zach said. I think the Parker Washington 4 targets, although I get what you're saying, Zach, is a little concerning for me. I get maybe it was a scheme, maybe it was a plan, but I mean, and Jordan, I know you went back and rewatched this game, and Zach, I think you did too. But I felt like of those 4 targets, like 3 were super early. And I could be wrong. Maybe you guys can correct me on that.
Well, one of them was the drop, which was just like a quick pass out to the side. I think the other 2 were just like crossing routes across the middle. So.
Yeah, but I mean, like in the game, I felt like they were all early.
Yeah.
Either first quarter or even like early second quarter was 3 out of those 4 targets. And like I said, I could be wrong. Let us know in the comments if I'm wrong. Because you always like to let me know in the comments, but it's fine. Anyways, and then yards after catch, I love, like, Lambert Smith had 58 receiving yards, 45 of them after the catch. Brenton Strange, 77 receiving yards, 56 after the catch. Obviously, that touchdown helped on that one. Kevon Lee, 15 yards, 12 after the catch. Tinsley, 84 yards, 41 after the catch, which we just talked about, that big long one at the end of the game. And then you look at Parker Washington, 30 yards on those 2 catches, only 7 after the catch. So the one was a pretty deep throw, or moderate deep throw, obviously not super deep. But I think that's a little concerning for me. And then, like Zach said about depth, obviously we weren't Michigan with 15 guys pulling people out of the bleachers to get catches, but we did have 10 different players get a target. So, I mean, the depth is there. And obviously Theo Johnson didn't play. So there's another guy that you would imagine would get a target. So that puts us at 11. Um, we got depth there, and like I said, I'm not. I think if Clifford can get them the ball, he can clean up some of the drops. I think the receivers will be fine. I have no doubt in our top 3 receivers and our tight ends.
And on that point, referencing the top 3, just since I have the snap count up, oddly enough, one of the positions where you would normally see a ton of guys play if your goal is developing depth. Lambert Smith had 59, played 59 snaps out of a total of 78 for the offense. Parker Washington 58, Mitchell Tinsley 55. So you had those 3 playing,
dominating,
75% of the snaps. Harrison Wallace had 22 snaps, and then true freshman Omari Evans, I believe he's a true freshman, 4 snaps. So you really had 3 guys dominating the snaps. You had Harrison Wallace getting some minutes or getting some snaps, and that was it. And I think if I recall, Franklin may have mentioned, not at the post-game press conference, but earlier in the week, that he didn't feel like they had a 2 deep at receiver, which is a little bit concerning, especially, again, given the fact that he's made it such a point to try to develop depth. So, maybe there's guys that are waiting in the wings, but hopefully the big 3 can stay healthy, because I think, to Devin's point, with Lambert Smith, Parker Washington, and Mitchell Tinsley, you have a true 3-headed monster there where I don't know who the number 1 guy is. I think it could, on any night, could be any one of them. And I think that's a good thing to have.
Yeah. And, talking yards after catch, that's a perfect transition into our hot topic of the day, quarterback. Is this a Clifford problem that we're seeing so many yards after catch, not so many, catching the ball and going deep? So let's talk about that. Zach, you want to start us off, or you want me to start us off, or?
Hey, whatever works for you.
All right, I'll just start us off here. I'm personally a fan of Clifford, and you saw any of the comments. I've been out there fighting the good battle for him. So, do I think he's gonna play in the NFL? No, probably not, unless he has an absolutely incredible season. But do I think he gives us the best chance to win games now? Yeah, and I think he should be starting because of that. I know we talked a little bit about it. Like I said, I went back and rewatched the tape. He played perfectly all right. I don't think he was stellar in any category. He definitely played worse in the second half, coming out from those cramps or whatever stomach issues he may have been having, abdominal issues. I just think he is missing some throws he should be making as a 6-year quarterback. And I know some people are just want to have his head for some reason. I don't really get the hate of him, but he played perfectly all right, and he showed up when we needed him most, and that was in the final 2 minutes. And I know what you'll say, it's Purdue, and there's never a reason he should have thrown that interception, but it's college football. It happens. Even if you're a 6-year guy, you're going to make mistakes at some point. So I'll turn it over to you, Zach. I said my little piece, and we'll circle back, because I know Devin's going to talk about Drew Aller, and then maybe I can chime in a little bit on that situation as well. So,
yeah, maybe this is one category where we don't have what seems like unanimity amongst the 3 of us. But so I'll preface my comments with a couple sort of introductory remarks. One of which is my belief, and this has been the case for the entire Clifford tenure, is that he's not an elite quarterback, and I don't think there's defenders out there that would say he's one of the handful of guys in college football that you would say is elite. But I think he's perfectly adequate if you have the roster around. And I think what one thing we're going to talk about, both as part of the recap today, but also going forward, is I don't know that this is a Big Ten title caliber team that we have, right? I think there's some flaws on this team. Is Clifford the quarterback that can elevate a flawed team to a conference title or into the college football playoff discussion? I don't think so. But I don't think the true freshman Drew Aller is probably at that level yet either. We're not at practices. We don't see what's going on behind the scenes. I think you play the guy that gives you the best chance to win. And even if that means the highly touted 5-star recruit is standing on the sidelines, so be it. Now, if Aller's better and it's clear and that's the case, and then he should be playing. But my takeaway from last season and the Purdue game is that if your belief is that the biggest problem that the program has at the moment is quarterback play, you're missing the forest for the trees. And that's, again, should Drew Aller maybe see a series here or there just to mix it up, keep him happy? that's a whole nother discussion. But the people that are the portions of the fan base that, and I think every fan base has these folks that just always think we're just a quarterback away, or the backup quarterback is the solution to everything that ails us. That's 99% of the time that's not true. I think he obviously had a terrible, I mean, the interception wasn't just that he threw a pick. It was that the guy was wide open and he overthrew him by about, the receiver, there could have been 3 receivers stacked on top of each other.
15 feet.
Yeah. So it was terrible. And nobody's defending that. But most quarterbacks will have 1 or 2 of those a game. Just unfortunate that in that moment, it went right into the arms of the safety who was waiting downfield. And then it gets returned 60 or 70 yards for, I think, what I've seen described as a puke 6.
Yeah, it made me want to puke too.
Yeah, there's a lot. I think the Purdue safety wasn't the only person puking after that play. But yeah, we could probably do a whole hour recap on Clifford and quarterback play. I think the biggest thing is that it's been 4 years of him starting, and Penn State hasn't quite gotten over the hump. And actually, a couple of years that were pretty rough after the Saquon McSorley era, and it's real easy to make a scapegoat out of the quarterback. And again, I'm not here to say he's a great quarterback. I just think he's probably about the level of a quarterback you'd expect for a program with the players that Penn State has at the moment. I think this is probably a team with a 10-2 ceiling, and I don't think there's a quarterback on the roster that's going to elevate the team above that.
Yeah, and my whole thing is let's keep Clifford in until he loses us a game or 2 and we're no longer fighting for the Big Ten title. Then if you want to say, okay, Clifford and this season, if we're not going to compete for the Big Ten, what does it matter if we win 10 games or 8 games at that point? Like, let's get our guys developed, because looking at the roster next year, we're on offense really just losing Clifford and Tinsley. So you could return almost your full offense, really. So I see the upside of, hey, let's get Aller experience, all that. And I just don't think that now is the time to put him in and throw him into that situation. Like, if Clifford gets hurt, yeah, sure. Like, let's see what he can do. He has the number 2 spot. We saw him come in when Clifford, had these phantom cramps or whatever you want to call it. He didn't come out at halftime. So we've seen him, on the field. He didn't do anything that was that crazy. I mean, he had a great pass, but I just don't think he's going to solve our problems. And if we're pulling the starting quarterback when he's winning, like, what's the point of that, in my opinion? But Devin, I'll let you take it over. I know you've been chomping at the bit to go defend yourself from the comment section. So,
all right, I got 3 minutes and 50 seconds to a forced commercial break here.
Yeah, there we go.
So I completely agree with what Zach is saying. Do we win that game Thursday night if Drew Aller is the quarterback on that last drive? I will admit, no, I don't think so, because you need that experience. And Sean Clifford has that experience because he's 50. So the problem with Sean Clifford, and my whole issue with Sean Clifford, Zach hit at it a little bit, is we're now in year 4 of Sean Clifford experiment. And I don't see any growth. I don't see him making better decisions than he made 4 years ago. Part of that, I think Sean Clifford has never been good at getting to his second or third read on a passing play. It's always been my first read, or I'm going to run. And right now, for whether it's the injury or the extra injury that he got there at the end of the first half or whatever, but he couldn't run, and he chose not to, I guess I should say. I don't know if he couldn't, but he chose not to run. So whenever his first option wasn't open and he couldn't run, it made us look worse than it made him look worse than I think he probably played. And I will admit that I was probably too hard on him on Thursday, because I mean, he won co-offensive player of the week in the Big Ten. He had 4 touchdowns. He literally won the game for us. I just don't see
5
him.
5 touchdowns.
5 touchdowns. Oh yeah, Rushington. I'm sorry. So, but either way, I'm just saying I don't see Sean Clifford making growth in that progression from wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 2 to tight end to running back to run. It's wide receiver 1 or run, and he's not running right now for whatever reason. So that's concerning for me. On the Drew Aller side, I think that we are, now that I've seen us play a game, I think best case scenario, we're 9-3, probably 8-4. If I had to change my prediction, I said 9-3 at the beginning of the year. I would say we're probably 8-4. So to me, if we're an 8-4 team, is Sean Clifford going to make us 9-3? I don't know. And is 9-3 different from 8-4? No, not to me. So I would rather go 7-5 with Drew Aller than 8-4 with Sean Clifford, because it sets us up for next year. And like Zach said, obviously Jordan likes to put Coach Devin there beside me. I'm a high school sports coach, and I always say, like, you aren't at practice, you don't know what's going on. And Zach's 100% right. Obviously, Sean Clifford has won the job at practice. Obviously, he has been the number one guy. But is it James Franklin's bias at this point? I mean, I'm gonna stick with the guy who got me here. Like, I forget, it's an old NASCAR saying of, like, dance with the person that brought you here whenever they're at super speedway races. Like, is he sticking with Sean Clifford because he brought him this far, or is he actually the better quarterback every day at practice? And obviously we'll never know, because I'm not unless we get invited to practice. And if you're listening to this, invite us to practice and we'll tell you what's going on. But that at the end of the day, we won't know. Sean Clifford's going to be the starting quarterback, and I hope he has a great season. I hope he has an unbelievable season. I just don't see it, and I would rather be mediocre with a true freshman than a 6-year senior.
Just a quick shout out to Penn State jerseys on Instagram. We did a collaboration with them. Check them out on Instagram. Links in our description. Give them some love with a follow or a comment, and we're gonna head back into the Nittany No Huddle studio. Send it over to Zach. Let's cover what you think about what Devin said in regards to our quarterback situation.
Yeah, so I actually think Devin made two really good points that I wanted to kind of basically agree with and follow up on. One of which is Clifford's ability to read multiple layers of the defense, multiple receivers. And I think what you see a lot of times is with him, if you watch his feet, you can always tell when he's in trouble because the happy feet start.
Yes.
And part of it is, Christian Hackenberg had the same thing. McSorley had, even at the height of the 16, 17, 18 era, McSorley, the line it's like PTSD perhaps from playing behind bad lines or whatever it ends up being. With Clifford, when he has to, even sometimes when he gets a good pocket, you see those happy feet and you can tell he's moving, his brain is moving. He's thinking, got to get the ball out. But sometimes his feet aren't under him, and you see the underthrows. And so for me, that's kind of a tell. And if you go back and watch that last drive, there was none of that, because the scheming on that last drive was perfection. There was an important 3rd and 2. You may remember we had twins left and right, and running back in the backfield. They motioned Lambert Smith from left to right. Nobody followed him, which told Clifford it was zone. So on the right side, they had 3 receivers and 2 defenders at the line of scrimmage and a safety over the top. So he immediately just read that and threw the quick out to Lambert Smith, who picked up a couple blocks and got the first down. Similar formation on the Tinsley play. You had, I think, Trips right, and you had Tinsley by himself on the left. And I think he was just reading that safety. Is the safety coming over to help on Tinsley, or are they playing numbers to the Trips because they just got burned on that? And the corner was playing soft on Tinsley, and there was no safety help. So he immediately took the snap, 3-step drop through the hitch to Tinsley. Timing was great. Tinsley's off to the races. More of those types of plays, I think, is what you need to see, because when he has a good read from the line of scrimmage or from pre-snap reads, he makes a good throw. Things look good. It's a lot of times when things break down, and he can run, or at least he used to run. To Devin's point, he's not the fastest guy or the most athletic, but he can run. But I think if you give him a bit more of the, give him some kind of pre-snap read and let him decide at the line of scrimmage, he looked really good in that last drive. And for me, watching that last drive, I saw a lot of that. Second point that Devin was right on, the money on, was Franklin and loyalty to older players. And I think you saw it with Paterno actually a lot. Franklin, I think, has a tendency to be committed to the older guys and just kind of perhaps rely on that seniority when in doubt. And one example I always think of is, people forget this, Saquon Barkley, true freshman, 2015, arrives on the scene, and immediately, I think it was Buffalo, maybe somebody in the comments can.
Yep, I was at that game. Yep.
Just immediately hurdles over a guy at the second game of the season against Buffalo. And it took halfway through the season before he started to get the starters minutes and get the bulk of the carries. Trivia for you guys is, who is the starting running back for Penn State in 2015 that Saquon Barkley had to sit behind for half the season or a third of the season.
Silas Red.
Nope.
No, he would have been gone.
He would have been gone.
Was it? No, it wasn't Nick Scott, but he was on that team, right?
Nick Scott would have been on that team. He probably would have still been in the running back depth chart because I think he ended up playing safety.
Yes.
What a weird swing.
And actually, Nick Scott, I think, was on the Rams last year when they won the Super Bowl, playing safety after starting out running back at Penn State. Saw Saquon Barkley and said, "Get me to some other position."
I need to be on the opposite side of the field as far away as possible from that man. That's what he said.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Zach. I'm drawing a blank for that.
Should we give the answer or leave it for the
comment? Oh, wait.
Noah Kane.
No, Jordan. Jordan has a jersey number of this guy, right?
He does.
It's 22.
It's 22.
Yeah, he was 22 that year.
And this guy was originally from Canada.
Oh,
I think he's from Canada.
I don't know. You're gonna have to tell us as soon as you say.
Tell us after the show.
I'll tell you after the show.
Let's leave it.
Leave a comment. Leave a comment. Maybe you win something.
Yeah. So anyway, point being, I think Devin made a number of good points there.
Can't think of
the QB situation, we're just gonna have to see it play out. I think the good news, whether you love Clifford, hate Clifford, and different about Clifford, is even in that small sample size, I think you saw that Penn State has a backup quarterback that can play, that can come in, and if something happens to Clifford or Clifford really, just does not perform, the season's not over. The way last year with the injury at Iowa, Roberson came in and you could just tell this is trouble. Like we couldn't even snap the ball without false starts. So I think we can breathe easy and know that there's at least one guy on the sideline, probably two, because I think Vayu actually was expected to be the number 2. So at least we've got.
I think he's
quarterback room. He's probably going to transfer at this point.
Yeah.
Why would you stay? But
what I read on Twitter, it sounds like he might be gone at the end of this year.
Yeah. Well, in today's
don't put too much stock into Twitter.
I know, but respected reporters is what I should, not just on Twitter. Respected reporters.
Blue check marks.
theathletic.com. Great website if you don't subscribe to that.
We're not sponsored by them, but shout out to them.
Yeah. Off topic, but I think he might be gone. I think it's already ahead of him.
Purdue too. I mean, at that point in today's environment, when you can portal out so easily, once you fall behind somebody on the depth chart that's the same age as you or younger, it's really tough as a 18, 19-year-old kid to think I'm just going to stick it out here and play backup. That's tough. But in any event, my takeaway from the quarterback play holistically against Purdue is the quarterback room is in a much better position than it was last year, regardless of how you feel about Clifford.
Agreed.
Yeah. And so that's going to wrap up the offensive side. Before we move on, why don't we just go through and give our position grades if you guys are prepared to do that. Offensive line. Yeah. Much like unlike Clifford, actually, we can perform off script pretty well. So offensive line, I would say they weren't as bad as I thought. Original, like off the cuff, I was like, oh, D, they were terrible. But I think I'd give them a C-. Room for improvement. If we shore up that right side, I think we could be all right. Don't know how great Purdue's pass rush actually was, but I think they earned a solid C, just like my college grades. So
I'd go C as well. I was kind of leaning that way anyway. So not C-. I'll go C. I'll go slightly higher.
Yeah, I think C is right on the money. It may just be us having been victimized by, at this point, like a decade of bad offensive line play that we're grading on a curve. But I think it was a decent effort for week 1, a lot to clean up. But I wouldn't go so far as to say that was I'd give them a D grade.
I will say they only had 1 penalty, so that is, whoever you are, that is good.
I don't think there did Penn State have any false starts?
No false starts.
I don't think they had any.
No illegal formations, nothing.
And you gotta, sometimes Franklin and his staff gets beat up a lot, but week 1 on the road in a stadium, not a huge stadium, but in a pretty big environment, no false starts, no formational penalties. You got to tip your cap to the staff. They at least have the guys ready from a operation standpoint. That's pretty impressive, I think.
Trying to earn that contract. All right, moving on to the running backs. I'll give I know the yards weren't there, but I honestly don't think that was a running backs issue. I think that's more scheme, RPO type situation. So I'm gonna give them a B minus. I think we saw the athleticism from the running backs, and they provided some great pass blocking as well. So I'll go B minus. I know I might get some hate for that because obviously we didn't get that 100-yard mark for a single back, but I saw some promise that I haven't seen in a while, at least after last season. So
I'll go C plus. Still a lot of improvement, but to have two freshmen get that many reps, not even just carries, but just snaps, like Zach referenced earlier, just have two true freshmen out there. It's a big deal. So C plus.
Yeah, I'm going to go B minus. I think it's right in that range. I think just we saw some glimpses from the two freshmen. That alone is maybe for me worth going from the C plus to the B minus. And I think again, on one hand, you can call it depth. On the other hand, you can call it we don't know who our running back is. But at a minimum, again, as injuries start to occur, you've got the two true freshmen that look like they can play at this level. You've got Lee that, for whatever his flaws, I think he definitely has to have a role, probably the power back, the short yardage back. And even Devin Ford had a really nice play on a huge 4th and 2 that eventually led to a touchdown. So maybe just from, if nothing else, other than 4 guys contributed and played fairly well, I'm going to go B minus.
All right. For the quarterback room, I'm going to go with a B across the board. I thought about going B plus. I know.
I thought you were going to go A.
I thought about maybe
built
going
that up. I was like, oh my God, Jordan, you're going A on here, aren't you?
I can't go A. I mean, I have some integrity still. I do think Clifford played well, but yeah, I mean, you can't have those kind of mistakes and get an A, like, in my opinion. I still think he played well, and a lot of those touchdowns were great individual plays by our wide receivers as well. So I think they should carry a little bit more of that weight as opposed to the quarterback on that one.
For all the crap I just talked on Sean Clifford,
I don't do it.
B minus. He could have been a lot worse, but that interception was so bad. It was
so bad.
B minus. Maybe it gets boosted up from a C because of Drew Aller. There you go. Since you said quarterback room, so
I said quarterback room. I didn't say
Sean Clifford. Yeah, so I'm going to say B minus as well. And I think, again, I kind of touched on this already, so I'm not going to belabor it. But I think if you look at the whole quarterback position, the takeaway is Clifford played decently well, made one horrendous mistake that probably pulls him down from a B maybe. And then Aller comes in and at least looks the part and looks like he can play. So the takeaway for me from quarterback, I think B minus is probably fair.
Yeah. And B's get you 9 and 4. So that's what I'm saying. Or 9 and 3, sorry.
B stands for Bo Pelini. Yeah, that eventually gets you fired.
Yeah. It worked out for Georgia, though.
Well, that's true. That is true.
So, wide receiver room. I think of our skill positions, I want to give them the highest grade, but those drops are going to drop that grade down. So, I'm going to go B minus. On the offense, I don't think we really had any A plus performances or A performances across the board, but I do think the wide receivers came through with their individual plays that led to touchdowns. So I'm going B minus or B plus. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll go B for the wide receivers and tight ends. Thought that, like you said, they made a couple really good individual plays. Obviously, it helps that Purdue couldn't tackle very well, but still, I think the wide receivers did a good job. Take away those drops, especially early. Like I said, I think a lot of those drops felt like they were in the first half. Definitely could be wrong, but they felt like they were without having it right in front of me. So I think
we're in the first half, 2 in the second.
Yeah, so I'll take that. So I'll give him a B.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go B plus. This one's a tough one because I think, again, if you take away the drops, it feels like A minus, maybe even an A, just because you have the big 3 at the receiver position all contributed. And then it's so nice to see 2 tight ends out there being active targets in the passing game. And that's not even including Theo Johnson, which we're not really sure at this point if he's hurt or what's going on, but take away the drops. It was a really, really good effort. I think you saw good blocking out of the tight ends too. I think if you go back and watch, there's a number of plays where we got outside where Brenton Strange threw a key block and even on Brenton Strange's touchdown, you had receivers downfield blocking, picking up blocks. So I'm going to go B plus.
Yeah, I like it. So that'll conclude the offensive side of the ball. Let's get into this defensive side of the ball. we're going to go right into our defensive line, which, to be honest, where were they? Like, I didn't see a lot out of them personally. Um, we had what, one sack, I think. Like, that's not going to cut it, to be honest. But I do think they could have probably played a little bit better. I know you have the snap counts up in front of us, Zach. If you want to just cover them quick, because I know people are going to be asking about Mustafar, and I saw on our preview that he did not actually play that many snaps, or at least not as many as I thought he would have, anyways.
Yeah. So do you want me to run down just
Yeah, you
the
can just
defensive
hit
line?
him real quick and then give me
Okay.
your opinion on the defensive
So
line.
at the defensive end position, Adisa Isaac had 60 carries or carries. Adisa Isaac played 60 snaps. Chop Robinson played 57. Nick Tarburton played 39. Those are the three guys with the core of the snaps. Amin Vanover played 11, and then the true freshman, one guy that we haven't really talked about, but was there one of the big freshmen of this 2022 class, Danny Dennis Sutton. He had 9 snaps. So you had 5 guys get snaps at the end position, but the bulk of those went to the 3, Isaac, Robinson, and Tarburton. At defensive tackle, you had Hakeem Beeman with 53, PJ Mustipher with 48, Devon Ellis 29, Jordan Vanderberg 18, and another, I believe, true freshman, Zane Durant, had 11. So for the 4 defensive lineman spots, you basically had 10 guys playing that all got 9 snaps or more, and basically 5 guys that got 40 snaps or more.
Yeah, that's some good depth rotation there. Devin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think playing against Purdue, who passed it 60 times, and we knew that they were going to pass it a ton. I didn't really expect any defensive lineman to necessarily be the star of the defense. So I didn't. I'll be the first to admit I didn't necessarily give them as many looks on reevaluations as maybe I should have. The biggest number that stands out to me are sacks and QB hurries, and we had 2 combined, or we had 2 sacks and 1 QB hurry, both sacks coming from Sutherland and Dixon, so not defensive linemen, obviously. So I would hope that they can get more pressure on the quarterback, especially when we had said in our preview, Purdue's offensive line was a huge question mark for them based on the reporters that cover Purdue. So I hope that they improve over the season, but I'm not necessarily stressed out yet because I think that when against the running game, they stop the running game, and typically, to me, defensive linemen should be more involved in the running game and just hurrying quarterbacks. So I'm not stressed yet about them.
Okay. Yeah, that's all good stuff. Like I said, I just didn't really, somebody with the hype of, PJ Mustafar, you would think you would see him on the field a little bit more and maybe see him involved a little bit more, but I just didn't see him. So I think it was just a little bit of like hype letdown, just
I think that
thinking.
one. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. That's basically all I was gonna
I
say.
think that one. I think he's still going to be an important piece. I think when you start to see the Michigans and the Minnesota, and when we start talking Big Ten teams that want to run the ball and line up with an extra offensive lineman and 2 tight ends, he's going to be an important piece. I think just the Purdue scheme was tough for PJ. I think they went a little bit lighter and quicker on the defensive line to try to get pressure. And something Devin touched on, I'm not a huge believer in like sacks necessarily as like statistically evidence of QB pressure. For me, it's more watching that game. Did it feel like O'Connell was getting pressured a lot? And in the first half, not at all. I mean, it's one thing if you're giving pressure and you're not getting the sacks because he's throwing the ball away or because they're just running such a quick hitting offense. It's a 3-step drop and you just can't get there. Those were whole different stories. I think the issue, especially in the first half again, was that we just weren't getting there and he had plenty of time to throw. And that's why you saw him in the first half look a lot more successful. The one thing, again, if I have to tip my cap to James Franklin, I guess I'll do it every once in a while, is referencing the depth. I think the defensive line is a position where I'm okay if you think you've got 10 guys that are worthy of being on the field, play them early, play them off, and get the rotation in. Because what you did see was on the last drive for Purdue, you saw Chop Robinson and others just manhandling the Purdue offensive line. And maybe it's one of those situations where after 4 quarters, rotating all of those guys, keeping them fresh, and the Purdue offensive line is getting worn out, that strategy finally paid dividends. And for me, it's great that we finally got there at the end of the game, but the lack of any sort of pass rush against what probably isn't an offensive line of, elite offensive linemen. That's definitely concerning, but again, it's early. So hopefully we can see some more pass rush going forward.
Yeah, I mean that's the hope that we can kind of get that pass rush established, maybe get some more sacks. So big talk, the targeting call. Zach, your initial thoughts on that call?
So my initial thoughts were it was not the smartest play from Carter. What on TV looks like clearly not a backwards lateral, so therefore not a live ball. You just got to kind of go in with your head up and read what's going on. After watching the game a second time, and I encourage anyone that's listening to this, go back and watch. The side ref totally screwed that play up, and he didn't blow the whistle until basically the moment when Carter was hitting the Purdue receiver. So you're a linebacker dropping back in coverage. You see a pass generally into the flat area. It's hard to tell, is that forward? Is that a lateral? Is that backwards? You don't hear a whistle. You see the Purdue player reaching for the ball, which to me tells me the Purdue receiver thinks I got to get the ball. This is a live ball. All of those things taken together. And again, the moment of the whistle is really important to me because you have to expect these players to play to the whistle. So was it targeting based on the definition of the rule and where his helmet hit the other guy's helmet? Maybe. At the same time, there's the idea of the Purdue player is like on his knees, his head's 2 feet off the ground, and the defender has to be entitled to make a play in the general vicinity of the ball. And you tell me how you're supposed to make a tackle in that area without using your head.
Keep your head out Bobby Boucher style.
Yeah. So in hindsight, we again, I said this last week, we could probably talk for an hour just about the targeting foul in college football and how I think it could be fixed. I think it could be as easily fixed as there's 2 levels of targeting, just like there used to be 2 levels of face mask. One is targeting that was incidental, 15-yard penalty, stay in the game. And then one is the hit where everybody at home watching is like, man, that guy just took an absolute cheap shot.
LSU.
Anyone who's watched or played football knows, can see these plays and tell it's just a guy trying to make a football play. It would be great if they weren't giving each other CTE versus the hits where he went in with a malicious intent. And why the NCAA can't figure that out is beyond me, but
we'll be happy to figure that out for money. Don't shut us down, NCAA. just joking. but yeah, I mean that targeting call really changed our linebacking core, and it forced us to play more depth there. But like I saw it wasn't even, to me, it wasn't forcible contact. Like he came in basically shoulder to shoulder, and his helmet happened to hit the other guy's helmet, but it wasn't forcible contact to the head and neck area on a defenseless receiver. First of all, the guy wasn't defenseless. Like he was making a play on the ball that looked live. But
right.
That's the takeaway from it. So
if the whistle's not blown, that guy's not defenseless because there's a ball in the ground and anybody on the field's entitled to make a play on it. And to your point, I think he clearly led with his shoulder. And it's just one of these plays where it's hard to disconnect your head from the play if you're leading with your shoulder, and your head and your shoulder are
right. And your shoulder hits and compresses down, and look, now your head's head to head. There's the helmet that's this big. So
he's far from the first guy to get ejected on a really unfortunate targeting call, and he certainly won't be the last. And I hate to sound pessimistic, but that's just part of the game in today's day and age.
Yeah. It is what it is. Devin, any thoughts on it? Or
no, I think you guys pretty much covered it. I'm over targeting. Yeah, I mean, I'm just targeting. Like you just watch other games over the weekend, like that Notre Dame Ohio State. I don't remember exactly, but it was late in the game. Notre Dame quarterback went to slide and got hit helmet to helmet, but they didn't even review it for targeting because he didn't lead with his helmet. But I thought quarterbacks were extra protected anytime helmets touch helmets. So it's just like I felt like that at least should have been reviewed. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I'm just kind of over targeting, like Zach said. Well, at this point, I would rather targeting just be like a 35-yard penalty and you get to stay in the game. Like just make it absurd. But
99 yards goes on the goal.
I mean, whatever. I don't think that there's any reason to eject these players whenever it's clear there's not intent. Like they're playing a fast-paced, up-tempo game where
Contact sport.
a full contact sport. Like basketball is a contact sport. Football is a full contact sport. And if you're afraid to get hurt, don't play football. I mean, I hate to say that because I know someone in the comments is going to say something. But like if you're afraid to get hurt, don't play football. There's golf, there's tennis, there's video games. I mean,
and you referenced basketball, and I think there's a good analogy maybe to be made there that there's a line between a good hard foul in basketball, making a play on the ball, and then something that everyone can see is that guy's not trying to block
two levels of that foul.
He's just trying to hurt the guy, and there's differing penalties for differing fouls
in basketball. Yeah.
And I think if you want targeting to be a priority in football, and I don't look good intentions, try to limit brain injuries. Everybody's for that. It's just how you go about trying to implement it is where I disagree with the NCAA.
Agreed.
Yeah, the only targeting we want to see is our comment section on Coach Devin. So
it's fine. And have thick skin.
You gotta have thick skin, you know.
Yeah.
Our 35.
I teach 14-year-olds all day. I teach 14-year-olds all day. I think I can handle a mean comment on YouTube.
I think that's probably our fan base, to be honest.
True story.
All right, moving on to what I've been just can't wait to get to. Let's talk about our secondary. And I know I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but I do not think our secondary played very well. There are a few players on our secondary who were absolutely a liability. Dixon, probably a nice guy, never met him, but just blown coverage after blown coverage. I mean, we had Chuck Sizzle just going to town on us in the first half. So I know everybody's gonna hate when I say that, but like I just don't know how like some of these guys are being recruited. Like they just some of them looked out of place, and we're talking about going against a receiver in Charlie Jones who he had 300 yards all of last year. Now, part of that is playing for Iowa, as most people saw this weekend. But just, I think our secondary in our preview, people were hyping up this secondary as better than last year. We won't even miss those guys. And I just don't think that was the case at all. I'll turn it over to Zach. You can kind of get into it, and then we'll go to Devin, and I'll finish up with some closing hot takes. So.
Yeah, sort of like the quarterback discussion, and maybe it's just indicative of the Penn State fan base where it's everything's hot or cold, everything's all or nothing, everything's extreme one way or the other. I've seen a lot of folks with Jordan's position, which is that the secondary got torched and was a liability. And I've seen a lot of people talking about how great Porter Jr., for instance, played. And I think he did make a number of really good plays. He also got torched a lot. I mean, let's be honest, if you go back and watch that first half, Charlie Jones was beating whoever was covering him. So I think what the issue is we came in feeling like we've got a lot of liabilities on this team, or at least a lot of question marks, and the secondary is not one of them. And then the first game of the season, you see an Iowa transfer wide receiver just running circles around some of our defensive backs. So I think it's one of those things of expectations. Maybe we're a little too high, or just maybe it's just one game and we got to kind of wait and see. You know, the flip side, of course, is that they did throw the ball 60 times. So anytime you do that, there's going to be completions. There's going to be big plays. There's going to be some good things that you do through the air. The flip side to that is when you throw it 60 times, I'd like to see more interceptions, more of a pass rush, more of pressure on the QB. Porter Jr., I think, dropped what probably would have been a pick six early in the game. So for me, I'm maybe a little bit more even keeled about the secondary's performance. I don't think it was good enough for what we expect to be the strength of the defense. And what a lot of people are saying is maybe as good as any secondary in the Big Ten. I think it's got to be better, but from a talent standpoint, it's maybe the one position group that I can say I wasn't thrilled about it, but I'm not giving up. I know we kind of sort of glossed over a lot of the names at the linebacker position. That's more of a position where I'm concerned, and I don't know that my concerns are going to go away at any point. Between Porter Jr., Kalen King, Daquan Hardy had some moments. Jair Brown, I don't think he had a vintage game at safety, but he's a guy I think he's going to be fine and turn it around. So I was concerned, but I haven't really lost a ton of confidence in that position group is probably how I would summarize it.
Yeah, Devin, I'll let you say your piece before I get into it. So
yeah, I'm right with you, Zach. I they definitely had some concerns, some errors in the first half, but I thought, especially down the stretch into the fourth quarter, I thought the secondary did pretty well. I know I don't think I really said much on our 3 and out about the secondary because I was more concerned about the linebackers, like you said. Yeah, Joey Porter looked bad at times, but he's also just makes plays that are just, I don't know, it shakes your head both ways, like, wow, that was the dumbest play I've ever seen, and wow, that was unbelievable. And then a couple of young guys I thought looked okay that I'm interested to see how they fit in if they keep getting the reps they're getting. And I know we don't have a ton of time for Zach to go over the count, but Jalen Reed, the sophomore safety, I thought number 7, I thought he looked okay at times. And number 6, Zakee Wheatley, he had one play where he got torched and then looked really good in a couple other plays. And I thought that he might be able to help here. I think
He
he's
also had that
a
fumble.
redshirt freshman.
He
had what?
Wheatley had the fumble, caused the
Yes,
fumble.
correct.
And he is a
With
redshirt
just a
freshman.
phenomenal play. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
textbook, punched the ball out right into the hands of Porter Jr. Like,
Right.
everyone's like, oh, he did so well to stay in bounds. He was standing in bounds, like it literally
Yeah,
landed
he
in
just
his
didn't
lap,
get
and he
out of
just laid
bounds.
down. Like,
Right. So Wheatley is one that I'm looking forward to seeing if he can earn more reps, or if they even need him to earn more reps, depending on how other people play. And like Zach said, I think maybe he took some snaps away from Jair Brown because he wasn't quite the same player I expected him to be on Thursday.
Yeah, real quick, if I
go ahead,
can,
Zach.
Devin referenced this snap count. So we've done it for every other position group, so I'll try to be quick. They played 5 cornerbacks. Porter Jr. played 75 out of a total of 88 snaps. Kalen King played 59, and notably, he was only targeted 3 times. So whether that was they felt like he was a strong point and they were staying away from him, or whether it was just the flow of the game, it felt like they were kind of targeting Porter Jr.
I agree.
And that's why I think part of the reason he had such highs and lows is that they were just throwing his way a lot. So that led to him getting beat some, and that led to him snuffing out a lot of passes.
How many targets did Porter Jr. have?
I don't have that number in front of me, but it was a lot. I mean, I think he had 6 credited pass breakups.
Right.
And then there was a couple plays where he got pass interference, probably 2 at least. And then there was a few other plays where he just got beat for a completion. So just a lot of, for whatever reason, for the guy coming into the game who you think the defense or the offensive coordinator would want to say, let's go to the other side of the field, there was a lot of balls thrown in his direction. But again, Kalen King was second in snaps at 59. Johnny Dixon, oddly, for me anyway, was third at 44. Daquan Hardley only had 34, and Marquise Wilson, number 8, had 13. I like Hardy a lot. I think we've talked about him in the past.
He's the truth.
he had his ups and downs too. If you can recall on Purdue's last drive, or I think it was their last
drive, yeah.
He got shook at the line of scrimmage by a receiver who ran a corner route, and O'Connell underthrew it. A good throw. It's a completion, but Hardy didn't give up on the play, hustled back and made a perfect pass breakup. And one thing I want to give Penn State defenders credit for is you can tell they're taught when you get to the point where you're making contact with the receiver, you got to at least throw your head around, because you can tell watching these games every Saturday, the referees are trained to see is the defender making a play on the football, and is he trying to figure out where the football is, or is he just sort of running into the receiver? And I got to give Penn State's defensive backs credit because they always try to get their head around. Daquan Hardy made a kind of a game-saving play at that moment, actually. So those were the corners. Safety Jair Brown played 82 out of a possible 88 snaps. Keaton Ellis 46, Jalen Reed 40, Zakee Wheatley had 27. So if you're like me, when I first saw those numbers, you're adding those up and you're like, wait, that's a lot of snaps. I think Penn State was in nickel and dime pretty much the whole game. And there was even a few plays I noticed in Purdue's last drive where Penn State had 7 defensive backs on the field. So that's one thing we maybe tip our cap to ourselves or pat ourselves on the back. We talked in the season preview that maybe this year, just because of personnel, you see a ton of nickel and dime formations, just because you got to get guys out there you can trust, and linebackers a question mark. That's something to watch going forward. Obviously, against a Purdue type team, that works. You put 6 or 7 defensive backs on the field against Minnesota or Michigan, or one of those teams that likes to run the ball. That's maybe not going to work. So something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely. All good stuff there. I love the stat side breakdown. I know we'll probably have some nerds in the comments enjoying that. But first thing I want to say is I'm gonna take some heat as being a Porter hater. I'm not a Porter hater. I just don't think he played as great
Yes,
as
you are.
everyone thinks. Or maybe I am. I don't know. But his pass breakups, yeah, he had 6. But you go back and watch the film on those, at least 3 out of those 6 were thrown directly at him. Like just bad throws that were behind the receiver on a cross route where he was open. And so I think some of that has to be taken into consideration. I think getting pass blocks is great, like phenomenal stuff. But when you're giving up 80 yards to Mr. Chuck Sizzle in the first half, like that's a problem. So
Well, when you're giving a guy a new nickname, basically because he's getting so many completions that Gus Johnson has to come up with another name for him, not
yeah,
a good sign.
yeah, if his name's being called that much, you don't want to hear it. So like I just think everybody was so hyped for this, and I just don't think the secondary delivered. Like they gave up a lot of points, even without the pick six. Like we're still over what we were at 28 points or something like that. 24
Well,
points.
I would say we gave up a lot of yards. Like we gave up more yards than I would have liked. But the one thing, because you got to remember, Purdue scored 28, and 7 of them were or 31, and 7 of them were from Clifford. So
right.
Defensively, 21, 24 points, not great, but not terrible. I think for me, it's more the ease with which we let them go up and down the field on certain drives.
Yeah. The bend but don't suck kind of play methods. So yeah, I was actually kind of disappointed in Jair Brown. He missed a lot of tackles in open space. And that you might have saw Porter Jr. actually had a lot of tackles too. I think 8 solo tackles.
I think he led the team in tackles, which
Yeah.
again is not a
That's
good
not
sign,
a good sign.
but
yeah, but I just think he didn't play as well as we've seen Jair Brown play. And especially, missing some of our safeties that went to the NFL last year. That was a huge miss to not have that elite play at safety. So that's all I'll say. I do think my favorite person on the secondary is King. I went back and watched a lot of his plays. He really shut down their number 2 receivers most of the time. So he played very well. He had a few plays where he got beat, but when they're throwing 60 times, it's going to happen. So I don't expect any of our corners to be, 100%, but I just think some of our big names didn't make the plays I was expecting them to make essentially. And I think the secondary maybe isn't as bad as I originally thought, but I don't think they were as good as some people were hoping. So let's do a quick around the horn. We'll go player or position ratings. So we'll start with the D line. D line didn't really do anything special for me, but they didn't really give up a lot rushing wise. So I'm just going to go with a solid B. I think they were perfectly kind of average. So
Yeah,
I'll
I
say
would. Oh, go ahead, Zach.
go ahead, Devin.
I would have went B minus. So that I echo everything we already said.
Yeah, I got a B minus there as well. I think solid. Would have liked to see maybe a little bit more, but there's room for improvement, and I think there's some good players there that are going to shine.
Yeah. All right. Linebackers, I think overall total portion of the game, they were probably our worst position. So I'm gonna give the linebackers a C minus.
Agreed. C minus. Obviously, not sure how that would change without the targeting call. Changes a lot of substitution plans and all that kind of stuff. But Curtis Jacobs was kind of a ineffective player. Elsdon looked okay at times. We were pretty high on him in our preview. I thought he looked okay at times, and other times it just was kind of non-existent. So yeah, I'll agree with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna say C minus as well. That feels right. I think Jacobs didn't really pop, and we've talked before. If you're a Penn State fan, you're gonna want to see Curtis Jacobs having a big year. I thought whether it was Elsdon or Kobe King at middle linebacker, that position may be a problem. There was a couple times we were in zone coverage, and they ran that mesh concept. If anybody's ever played Madden or NCAA, you know how awesome that play is. And we had some moments where it didn't seem like the linebackers could run with guys. That's probably going to be a problem long term. But yeah, I'll say C minus.
Yeah. Then we'll just cover whole secondary as one unit. I'm probably going to get a little hate, but I think the secondary was probably a C, maybe a C plus at best. I think a lot of room to grow. We knew Purdue was going to come out and hit us with the pass attack. I just didn't see enough that I thought they, were that spectacular in any asset. So
I'd go B minus. Almost go B here because they made plays when they needed to. Obviously, 60 pass attempts. There's going to be Oklahoma going to get 350 yards on 60 pass attempts. I would expect them to almost have more yards. So I'll go B minus. There's definitely things that we need to get better at, and we'll talk about in our Ohio preview that'll come out in a couple of days or whatever. That Ohio passes a crap ton as well. So there's another chance for the secondary to look good. So
yeah,
B minus.
Yeah, I think Devin's all over it. I'd say probably C plus for me, but for basically all the same reasons Devin just referenced. I think it's easy in the heat of the moment after the game to be more concerned, but upon reflection, again, they throw the ball 60 times. Any competent passing offense they're gonna stack up some yardage. For me, it's more like with 60 passes, you want to see some sacks, you want to see some interceptions, and the pass rush wasn't there as we talked about. But looking back, we had a number of Keaton Ellis, we didn't talk about the play where he comes over from the safety position and almost makes an interception. So we catch one or two of those interceptions, and I think maybe it's a whole different story. So
yeah,
C plus, B minus, somewhere in that range, I think is definitely reasonable.
Yeah, and I think getting some takeaways can take you from, a B minus, C plus to an A. Like those are what win games. So that'd be nice to see. So real quick, we'll hit the special teams. I just want to say Amore, I think that's how you say his last name, our punter. Phenomenal punting job this weekend. He had 3 balls land inside the 5, and I say land inside the 5 because we absolutely botched one of those. So his average, I think I have the stats up here real quick.
46.9.
46.9. If you take away that one that was botched, he's easily over 50 for his average. So I think he is a huge just a huge piece that, really helped our defense out. We pinned them deep a lot. Even our kickoffs, I don't think they returned any kickoffs. I think almost every single one was a touchback. So I was very pleased with our special teams. We didn't miss any extra points. We didn't attempt any field goals, but 5 for 5 on extra points. Got to be happy with that. Some teams, LSU, would probably really appreciate having a kicker that can make an extra point.
Yeah, I think the kicking game was sound across the board. Kind of weird. We have two kickers for the kickoff team. Both of them seem that they can kick it out the back of the end zone, or at least pin it, inside the 5 and make them decide whether they want to return it or not. So, other than that one, and Jordan, you were all over it. I think it was Daquan Hardy that just
It was
for whatever reason, a ball that looked like it was just going to sit at the 2-yard line. He decided he needed to dive for it and ended up putting it in the end zone. But other than that one play, I don't think there's anything you can point to special teams and say we didn't perform.
Yeah, no big kick returns, no big punt returns. That's what you want. I'd rather them fair catch every single ball because then you never have to worry about it. And you might see a muffed punt there. So
Parker Washington did have a really nice return that unfortunately he had just put his elbow down that took it back. But it's nice to have. He seems very sure-handed, and if he gets some time, he's the type of guy I think that can make some people miss. So I feel pretty good about
Singleton's taking the kickoffs, so
yeah,
he averaged over 20 yards.
So maybe a bit of more of a threat in the return game, both kick and punt, than perhaps we were used to seeing, or at least have seen in recent memory. So that's helpful as well. But the big thing, to Jordan's point, is just I want somebody back there who will catch the ball. The special teams is don't lose the game in special teams. You don't need to win it in special teams. Just don't lose it.
Not trying to trash on LSU, but they had some issues last night. So, but couldn't have happened to a better coach and team there. So, but that's all I got for special teams wise. Do you guys have any? You want to give just a final recap of what you thought first game? I think better than I expected, but not as good as I was hoping, I guess.
I will say it was a great game to watch. It's a Big Ten road game week 1. So I think we got to caution ourselves and everybody else to just sort of temper your immediate expectations. A lot of teams are playing a cupcake or a tomato can in week 1, and some of them struggle with said cupcakes or tomato cans. So I think you get out of there with a win in a game that maybe you probably didn't deserve to win. Just take it and move on and work on, improving in the areas you need to improve. I will say, upon more reflection after the game, watching certain aspects of the game, I do got to tip my cap from a coaching standpoint. I think we clearly won the last 2 minutes of the second quarter, and we obviously won the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. We came in with a plan clearly of we're going to run the ball, and we're going to run the ball a lot. And the defensive strategy of we're going to play a lot of depth, get people in there, keep people fresh. It showed itself in the last Purdue drive when our defensive line finally got through. So a number of reasons why I think I got to say that the coaching staff, I think, did a pretty good job preparing for the game. And then in terms of the in-game strategy and in-game adjustments, it was good. And at least in comparison to Purdue, you got to feel like our coaches didn't lose us the game. Whereas if you're a Purdue fan, you're looking at Jeff Brom and saying, can we at least try to run the ball once in those last 3 drives and burn clock? I mean, for me, I think Penn State got 3 possessions in the final 6 minutes of the game while losing. If you're playing like a Michigan or somebody and you give them the ball back with 6 minutes left, you might not get any possessions after that. And part of it is Purdue. They know who they are. They throw the ball, and that's all well and good. But that's why situational football, if you can't run the ball, you're not going to be good in those game management, situational football type end of game strategies. And if you're Purdue, you feel like we just gave that one away.
Yeah. Well, if you can't run the ball, set up a screen or draw and get the same effect.
Right. Or throw passes that have the same effect of a run, but they basically didn't change their playbook at all. And I respect the courage to do that. In hindsight, it didn't work.
I mean, that's basically what Penn State football has done the last 4 seasons. But I will say Franklin, he surprised me. I feel like, usually we're talking about these close games where he mismanages time and everything. And I mean, I think he coached pretty perfect. I mean, some of the field executions weren't good, but there was not a single play call where I was like, what are they doing? So,
well, and the end of the second half, frankly, we won the game. And obviously the last drive won us the game, but where we really won that game was at the end of the second quarter after the fumble forced by Zakee Wheatley that we referenced earlier.
Yeah.
I think there was 30 seconds when we started that drive.
Yeah.
There's a lot of coaches that would say, we're on the road week 1. Let's just take a knee and get to halftime. And he didn't, and it paid off. And I think you got to give him credit for that. I will say, the players stay aggressive, right?
And we, in the longest time, I cannot remember the last game where going into halftime, we had all 3 timeouts, or like into the last drive, we had all 3 timeouts still. Usually we burn one on some nonsense.
And that's like we talked about earlier with the no false starts, no delay of games. You have to, I mean, the players obviously get credit for that, but I think that reflects on the coaching staff as well, that they came in, there was no questions, everybody knew their role, everybody knew operationally, formationally, here's what we're going to do. Yeah. And it reflected on the field.
And last little piece, false starts and delay a game, that falls on your quarterback too. So I think having that, 40-year-old quarterback back there, he's seen a thing or two. So what do you think, Devin?
Yeah, I mean, overall, at the end of the day, we're 1-0. The Go PSU Sports gets to sell 1-0 t-shirts. I don't know if you saw them today. They look so stupid, but yeah. So we're 1-0. Should be able to get to 2-0. Hopefully, we'll talk about that here in a couple of days. And at the end of the day, that's all you can hope for is to go on the road in a Big Ten game and find a way to win when you don't deserve to. It says something about the team. Obviously, maybe you want to go in there and win by 40, but at the end of the day, being able to overcome some adversity in week 1, it's nothing to be too disappointed in for a week 1 performance.
40 years from now, I'll tell my kids we won 69-0, so it doesn't matter.
I'm sure he will.
All right, that's all I got. If you guys have any closing remarks for this week's podcast, we're gonna cover our pick'ems and everything in the next episode. But I will say you guys were wrong on your pick'ems. So
yeah, well, I mean, West Virginia basically pulled a Purdue on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
I mean,
one
they
hurt.
should have won that game actually. So
Yeah.
But I'm undefeated. So you guys are
Congrats.
basically Nebraska.
Yep.
But all right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Spotify.